Update on flooding. NEMA convenes emergency meeting as it inaugurates zonal incidents coordinators.
Another Boko Haram infrastructure destroyed by the Nigerian Air Force in Borno State.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall examine challenges of combating illicit financial flows and recovery of stolen assets.
Illicit financial flows simply refers to unrecorded and mostly untaxed illicit leakage of capital and resources out of a country. Now, this is a global challenge that is more pervasive in developing countries.
Yes, you're quite right, Joy. Now, illicit financial flows manifest in many ways, but are broadly narrowed down to three, namely proceeds from corrupt dealings like bribes and false declaration of contracts, proceeds from criminal activities such as human trafficking and sale of illegal arms, and tax avoidance by corporations and wealthy elites.
Now, these illicit financial flows generally thrive in an atmosphere of corruption and contribute to the rape of economies where the commonwealth is looted, diverted, and in many cases siphoned to private pockets of those in power and their collaborators.
Yes, Joy, indeed, the scenario you have painted, unfortunately, somewhat represents what Nigeria has gone through in many respects, which is why the effort to fight corruption and disrupt illicit financial flows is receiving greater attention under the Buhari administration.
Yes, Kieran, and I guess that is why President Buhari is not slowing down on his anti-corruption fight, particularly since the African Union appointed him as the anti-corruption champion for the year of combating corruption.
Now, recently, an international conference on combating illicit financial flows and enhancing asset recovery for sustainable development was held in Abuja, where several resolutions were reached to, among others, mobilize resources for blocking illicit financial flows and recovering illicit assets for development.
So, to what extent is the world willing to combat illicit financial flows? What are the local mechanisms to deal with illicit financial flows? Is there a mechanism for institutional capacity development in carrying on this fight? What are the sanctions for individuals or organizations found to be aiding and abating the crime?
Serious questions indeed, Joy. Perhaps we should additionally ask what are the results of the journey towards recovery of stolen assets and their utilization in Nigeria so far? What are the avenues open for local and international corporations, and how strong are the laws dealing with illicit financial flows? These are some of the questions we shall put before our guests this morning. I am Kieran Umai, welcoming to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I am Joy Usiago, thanking you for joining us this morning. And as usual, we shall present our companion segments, which include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign and entertainment news. But first, let's take the news highlights with Kendi. Hi, Kenny.
Good morning, Joy and Kieran. Here is the news. In line with the presidential directive for the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, to declare a national disaster in the event of imminent outbreak of flooding, the agency has convened an emergency stakeholders meeting to review flood disaster situation in the country, with special focus on Niger and other high-risk areas. Director General of the agency, Mustafa Meaija, urged stakeholders to step up effort at evacuation and relocation of residents in flood-prone areas.
NEMA situation room has been activated for collecting data, analyzing the data or information received to guide the operations of the national EOC and the corresponding zonal EOCs. The nation, as regular as possible, would be informed of further development.
Meanwhile, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has constituted 5 incident response coordinators in the 5 zones with high risk of flood disaster to monitor situations and feedback for prompt response. Inaugurating the coordinators, NEMA's Director General Mustafa Meaje urged them to remain committed in the discharge of their duties. He said information is power, hence it required a regular update on flood situation in the various zones for prompt action and prevention. This move by NEMA is in line with presidential directive on regular update of the flood situation for immediate action.
Periodically updated, maintain sufficient supplies and equipment to ensure operational capability, and also manage information and its corresponding dissemination.
And the Nigerian police force is assuring electorate, the contestant and all law-abiding citizens in Osun State of adequate security throughout the state governorship election on 22nd of September. According to Force Public Relations Officer Jim Moshood, the force has deployed adequate personnel and equipment, including 2 surveillance helicopters, 30 armored personnel carriers, 10 armored personnel vehicles, and 300 patrol vehicles to cover the entire state, including difficult terrains. The force also warned that security personnel attached to public office holders and politicians and other VIPs will not be allowed to follow their principals to polling unit or collation centers throughout the election.
And conduct is contrary to the Electoral Act or that can incite disturbance of public peace before, during, and after the elections. Officers and personnel of other security and safety agencies deployed for the election are under strict instruction to be strict, polite, and civil, but firm in the discharge of their duties and other responsibility.
The resignation of the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, and acceptance by President Muhammadu Buhari are actions of honor, strength of character, and integrity. This was contained in a statement by Acting National Publicity Secretary of the All Progressives Congress, Yekini Nabena. The statement says the news that National Youth Service Corps NYSC exemption certificate tendered by the former finance minister was not genuine has been well reported in the media. Unlike all responsive and responsible government concerned about the truth and due process, the federal government undertook a diligent investigation of the allegation, stressing that the minister has taken the path of honor and resigned based on the outcome of the investigation. The statement says the party appreciates an immense contribution to the stability of the Nigerian economy in the past 3.5 years. Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, has emerged as the best improved airport in safety by Airport Council International Africa Region. General Manager Corporate Affairs of the airport, Henrietta Yakubu, in a statement said the airport was chosen as winner following an intensive evaluation process that considered entries from several airports in Africa. She said Secretary General of the Airport Council International, Ali Townsend, who informed Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport of the feast, said the award will be officially presented to the airport at the next ACI Africa Conference and Annual General Assembly. And now to security. The Air Task Force of Operation Lafayette Dolly over the night of 14th September and early morning of 15th September 2018 tracked and destroyed some Boko Haram terrorist vehicles that were attempting to launch fresh attacks on ground troops location at the Gudumbali and Damasak in Borno State. Director Public Affairs, Public Relations and Information of the Nigerian Air Force, Air Commodore Ibukunle Daramola, said the mission was initiated following intelligence reports indicating a convoy of Boko Haram terrorist vehicles had been sighted. The Nigerian Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance were then dispatched to search for and locate the convoy of the vehicles. The Boko Haram terrorist vehicles were identified, isolated and attacked by helicopter gunship in successive strikes. The Nigerian Army has constructed and inaugurated blocks of office and housing accommodation for officers and men of 22 Battalion in Mumbi, Adamawa State to enhance the efficiency in fighting insecurity in the area and the Northeast at large. The new General Officer commanding 3 Division of the Nigerian Army JOS, Major General Benson Akinyelayo, inaugurated the project, representing the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Yusuf Tukuburtai.
Infrastructure and basic needs to motivate troops' performance.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Joy and Karen after.
Thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. I'm talking business. Nigeria's inflation rises for the first time after declining for 18 straight months. This was contained in a recent data released by the National Bureau of Statistics over the weekend. Let's join Chimobi Walter Naji for more on the business news segment.
Welcome to the business news. Over the weekend, the National Bureau of Statistics on Friday released the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, with the rate rising from 11.14% in July to 11.23% in August. The Bureau pointed out that this was the first year-on-year rise in headline inflation, following 18 consecutive declines in the inflation rates. According to the report, the Consumer Price Index CPI, which measures inflation, increased by 11.23% year-on-year in August 2018. This is 0.09 percentage points higher than the rates recorded in July 2018 and represents the first year-on-year rise in headline inflations, following 18th consecutive disinflation in headline inflation. Increases were recorded in all divisions that yielded the headline index. On a month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 1.05% in August 2018, down by 0.08 percentage points from the rates recorded in July 2018. The NBS report noted that the urban inflation rate increased by 11.67% year-on-year in August 2018 from 11.66% recorded in July, while the rural inflation rate increased by 10.84% in August from 10.83% in July. In other stories, the registration of Nigerian domain name .ng country code top-level domain grew by 22% in 8 months to reach 125,814 in August 2018. Analysis of the latest data obtained from the Nigerian Internet Registration Association showed that the number of .ng domain increased by 22,718 from January to August this year. And meanwhile, the bearish sentiments witnessed in the Nigerian Stock Exchange abated over the weekend as equities market closed Friday on a positive note. The all-share index appreciated by plus 0.95% to close at 32,327.59 basis points, as against minus 0.84% depreciation recorded previously. Its year-to-date returns currently stands at minus 15.47%. And that's it on the business news. Many thanks for your time. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Thank you, Chimobi, for updating us on the business news. And right now, the next is a newspaper review, and Bayo is here.
Thank you, Kere.
Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you, Joy.
Our papers for the day. We'll start by looking at the Punch newspaper. The front page of the Punch newspaper, the lead story there says, EFCC, Customs place Fayose on watch list. And it comes with 2 riders, Immigration, DSS, Police to monitor governor's movement. Expect me on October 16, Fayose tells Commission. You can get details of the story on page 12. Kieran, do you have
yes, I also
papers
have
there with the same story?
Yes, on Fireshare, actually, we have two newspapers, the Daily Sun and the Nigerian Tribune. And let's begin with the Nigerian Tribune. The main headline on the Nigerian Tribune says EFCC places Fireshare on watch list, alerts customs, 2 riders placing me on watch list after notification. Petty, says Fireshare. And the EFCC didn't freeze a delegate's account, spokesman, page 4 and 29. And then on the Daily Sun newspaper, the main headline is EFCC puts Ekiti Governor Fireshare on watch list. Customs orders his arrest at border. Fireshare alleges bias and witch hunt. Page 6 has that story.
Bayo?
Well, that is an interesting development. You recall that the EFCC actually is responding to a communication that was initiated by Governor Ayodele Fayose. He had written to the EFCC that he will make himself available for questioning by EFCC by October 16th. And the EFCC, in a reply to the Governor Fayose, said, we appreciate the outgoing governor's sense of duty and responsibility. However, the EFCC adds that it is willing to receive the governor not on the 16th of October, but on 20th of September, without prejudice to his immunity. The implication of that is not too far-fetched. The governor has immunity, and when the governor has immunity, it means he cannot be prosecuted for any other, any offense for that matter. But a governor can be investigated. Meanwhile, the FCC is allegedly says is interested in monies that were ferried by a former minister to a vault in Ado-Ekiti, and its sources have actually trailed the money to associates and companies of a receiver, and it's because of that that they were following. However, this action had been taken by EFCC a long time ago, but it was blocked by an inquisition at the court, and the court granted that should cease because of the immunity that the governor was entitled to. The outgoing governor is to hand over on October 16th.
All right, so let's take a look at more stories.
More stories, yes. And
let's go back to The Punch and see other stories on the front page of the paper. Above the nameplate, this says, flooding, NEMA emergency centers to cover Benue, others. You can get details of that story on page 30. And below that headline, Tinubu's man, Sanwo-Olu, formally declares ambition. PDP reiterates offer to Ambode. The story is on page 10. And beside it, certificate forgery. Adeosun must return salaries. Face trial, says PDP. Let's go quickly to the foot of the paper. And above the foot of the paper, just a little bit, there's a picture story there which shows a flood scene at Kotonkarfi community on the Lokoja Abuja Road in Kogi State. This picture was taken on Saturday. Emirate upgrades, below that, let's take the stories trending at the foot of the paper now. Federal government plans 8.9 trillion naira budget for 2019. Headsmen raise Taraba village, kill 3. And those plotting to impeach me won't succeed. That is attributed to Saraki. You can get details of the story on page 15.
All right, let's run through Nigerian Tribune before Bayo comes in, because I'm sure he has a lot of stories to analyze. Below the nameplate of Nigerian Tribune, Ambode loyalists may write APC National Working Committee over mode of primaries. 2 riders move to Wu Fashola, Banire, Oki, Ashafa Kauli Seriki, others at Shawulu's declaration. That's on page 11 of Tribune. And of course, besides the photograph on the front page of the Tribune, we have some stories there. Oshebajo Economic Management Team meet on minimum wage on Tuesday. That's on page 38. Oshu election, that's the kicker. Police deploy DIG, AIGs, 8 CPs, 2 helicopters, 30 armored personnel carriers, 300 patrol vehicles for the Osun election. This is on page 29. Presidency attack on HSBC hypocritical, says Atiku. That's on page 38. Now we also have on the foot of the Tribune, reps vow to defend Dogara against impeachment on page 36. Buhari urges ECOWAS to meet 2020 goal of single currency. page 12. Bye.
Yes, Kirian, like you said, there is a nationwide flood alert. The National Emergency Management Agency has been enjoined to declare a nationwide emergency. And the National Hydrological Services Agency issued a red alert 10 days ago. The facts from NEMA's finding is that 12 states are already flooded. And the Nigerian Meteorological Agency has forecast that in the next 72 hours from today, there's going to be continuous rain in many states of the Federation. That paints a very gloomy picture as far as flood is concerned. Also, the National Hydrological Services Agency has indicated that the level of water in the confluence of Niger and Benue is now at 10.98 level. And this level is likely to increase if Lado Dam, that is in Cameroon, that dams River Benue, is opened. Already Lado Dam is at 21.4 meters level. The danger level is when they always open, is when it is 21.6 meters high. So it's already just about 0.2 of a meter to reach the danger level, for which if they don't open up the dam is likely to break. So down the floodplain of River Benue and River Niger, there is alarm for flood. Already, places are flooded around the confluence in Lokoya already. 10 communities have already been submerged. In Niger State, 100 communities have already are inundated with water. And the latest emergency is that National Emergency Management Agency has established what they describe as emergency response centers, 5 of them. One, Center A is Niger and Kwara, B is Kogi and Edo, C is Anambra, Taraba and Adamawa, D is Anambra and Delta, and E is Rivers and Bayelsa. NEMA headquarters is to serve as the number 6 emergency response situation. Already, coastal communities in Bayelsa, especially in Sabama area, are also already complaining of flood. This is to say, the Jeba Dam, Shiroro Dam, Kainji Dam, and Ladu Dam have all not been opened because they are all busy piling water. And so there is serious alarm down. And this is likely to be worse than what we had in 2012.
Because, sorry, Joe, you recall that last week we had the Kogi State Commissioner of Environment who actually told us here that there is a serious alarm in that area. And of course, if what we have is about 10-point-something meters, that of 2012, that was devastating, was about 12 points. So it requires about 2 meters more
to reach that danger.
To reach that danger. And when these dams have not been, the water in those dams have not been released. So it's going to be somewhat of a catastrophic situation if it's not properly, handled.
You're right, Kieran, but the good thing about it is the relevant agencies are being proactive. I remember they were in the studio last Friday on the NTA News, and they were talking about synergy and what they need to do, to prepare and also evacuate people who are probably around the bank of the river.
They have even involved the military. The military is also on the standby for purposes of evacuation and rescue mission. But that is very good. And proactively too, already the federal government has provided about 3 billion as means of resources to help tackle any eventualities that will arise from the flooding. Okay,
let's quickly go to other papers now. Let's go to the Daily Trust. The lead story there says, nearly 2 months after defecting to PDP, Saraki Kwankwaso, others still in APC on NAS website. And below the nameplate, Ganduje picks Gawuna as deputy. 14 companies responsible for 50% capital market infraction. And below the lead story is a picture, the gloomy picture of children paddling an inner tube across flooded street in the aftermath of the typhoon in the Philippines. Let's go quickly to the fresh facts. It comes with a kicker, the lead story. 2019 pre-presidential election series. Buhari still holds the ace, but North Central states may be his toughest challenge. Atiku, a man to watch. You can get details of that story on page 4. And beside that, news analysis, APC when sole candidacy is best option.
Okay, now, well, to the Sun, once again, and to the stories just besides the photograph there, where children are caught praying for the nation. These are children of an orphanage house in Jikoko here in Abuja. But we have some stories trending. Besides that, we have politicians plotting to derail 2019 polls, says APC. We can't score through election, win, says the CUPP. Now, NAF foils another attack on Gudumbali, Damasak, that's in Borno State. It's on page 4. Saraki dares APC on impeachment. Ruling party keeps mum. Is on 39. And again, sorry, there's a story here too, you know, in connection with what's our topic this morning, and that's on federal government. That's a top, you know, besides the nameplate. Federal government HSBC's fight gets messier as EFCC allegedly traces 33.6 million pounds laundered funds to 3 Nigerian accounts with the bank.
Kieran, I think we should take the editorial because before we let Bayo get in.
Well, quickly, we was also mentioned the resignation of the former Minister of Finance on Friday, and that has also been trending. And in fact, the APC has come to commend her for the honor, strength, and character she exhibited and integrity. The Publicity Secretary of the All Progressive Congress, Yakini Nabena, also commended the President for accepting the resignation. She admitted her NYSC exemption certificate was not genuine, and rather than allow it to affect the integrity, the credibility, and the administration, she chose the option to quit. There have been mixed reactions about it. Some socio-cultural groups have praised her for taking the path of honor, while others are saying she should be arrested and prosecuted. There are also indications that she's already traveled outside the country. Meanwhile, upon the president's acceptance of her resignation, the Minister of State, who used to be in charge of national planning, Zainab Ahmed, is now to oversee the Ministry of Finance. That said, there is also the story about the preparation for Osun election. Yeah. You think we are preparing for war? The Police High Command has sent in 8 commissioners of police, 40,000 personnel, 2 helicopters, 30 armored personnel carriers, 300 patrol vehicles, all in preparations for. And in fact, this will interest you. There are supposed to be 8 police areas in Osun State, and each of them is to be headed by a commissioner of police. That is the extent to which the police are very serious, and they have already, the warnings are there. Anybody who indulges in any electoral malpractice will be apprehended and arrested.
All right, Bayo, let's go
now
to our
editorial.
Yes, for today. It is taken from the Nigerian Tribune, and it is captioned this way: Banking, telecom services, and value for money. On September 19, 2003, following weeks of concerted mobilization, mobile telephone subscribers in the country took the unprecedented step of switching off their phones. With the Great GSM Boycott, as it was dubbed, the subscribers were desperate to convey their frustration with the shoddiness of the services being provided by the mobile telephone networks. Now, as a rule, Nigerians serve poorly and are poorly served, and any deviation from this culture of shoddiness always comes as a pleasant shock. The NCC-CPC inquiry is a great start, but the path to excellent customer service and consumer protection is long and tortuous. That's a bit we can take.
Well, the editorial is actually expressing a strong opinion about poor services provided by telecom and banking services, and they are emphasizing that in spite of the growth of tele-density for the GSM to about 150 million, the services are still very poor. And you will find out that many Nigerians have had to own 3-4 phones to be effective in communicating. Sometimes you are on the phone and you can't even hear the other party very clearly, and you're not too sure whether it's the phone you are using or the network itself that is providing the poor services. And relating to the banking, the criticism from the editorial is that there are so many innocuous charges in the bank that are unnecessary, and the services themselves are very, very poor. Interestingly, with the advent of the automated teller machines, people are able to get the services at the ATM, and it has reduced the queues in the banking sector. But they are lamenting the service, and they are challenging the agencies that are responsible. the Nigerian Communications Commission to be up and doing in emphasizing due and quality service in the telecom, and also the Consumer Protection Council to protect the interests of banking customers.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much indeed for providing the necessary analysis with respect to the issues arising on the national dailies. Thank you very much for coming. Tomorrow is yet another day.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, Good Morning Nigeria continues after this.
Information and culture.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, to set the tone for our discussion on illicit financial flows and recovering stolen assets, we have this background report put together by Garba Muhammad Natala.
Illicit financial flows is a term generally referring to cash earned, transferred, either illegally earned or used around the world. These proceeds are generated from illegal activities of corruption, money laundering, tax evasion, drug and human trafficking, illicit arms trade, and terrorism. As a matter of fact, such illicit financial flows have been a major concern, impacting negatively on nations, as they are denied of resources that are meant for the general good, while crime and criminality is fueled by the oxygen of illicit funds. A United Nations study revealed Nigeria and other African countries lose $100 billion annually to illicit financial flows. This is a huge amount that the country and the continent need for development and poverty reduction. Nigeria has, particularly under the Buhari administration, demonstrated serious desire and action to hold illicit financial flows and to recover stolen assets that have made Nigerians poor in the midst of plenty. However, tackling illicit financial flows remains a major challenge to the world, as those involved in it not only have a robust purse to fight the system and try to outsmart it, but also appear desperate to evade tracking and arrest. In some cases, they penetrate the system and compromise it. Nigeria has continued to insist that the global community could not turn a blind eye to such facts, hence the need to promote international cooperation to combat illicit financial flows in order to foster sustainable development. The Presidential Advisory Committee set up by Buhari administration seeks, among others, to profile ways to improve sanctions and enforcement mechanisms for perpetrators of illicit financial flows, other acts of corruption, as well as enhancing asset recovery and asset return, has continued to open up discussions among nations and actors, while seeking collaboration among partners. Some estimates indicate that Africa alone has lost over $1 trillion through illicit financial flows since the 1970s, far exceeding the inflow over the period. What are the mechanisms to deal with illicit financial flows and asset recovery for sustainable development? Are these proceeds difficult to track, and will tighter sanctions assist in abating such illegal flows? This is the focus of Good Morning Nigeria today.
Mohamed Natala there with that background report. Now, with us to discuss the topic is the Deputy Executive Director of Africa Network for Sustainable Environment and Justice, Mr. Leo Atabu. Mr. Atabu, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Kirian.
And here also with us in the studio in Abuja is Malam Abubakar Saleh, Systems and Business Development Analyst and Tax Consultant. We appreciate your presence here this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians.
Also in our Sokoto studio, we're joined by Professor Sadiq Isarada. He is a member of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACA. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Joining us from Germany via Skype is Professor Abdullahi Shehu. He is a former Director General of the ECOWAS Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa, GABA. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Germany.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Good morning.
All right, Prof, it's indeed nice that your audio is very clear this morning.
That's right.
And we will begin with you immediately. Now, let's go with the general understanding of the whole, gamut of what illicit financial flow is all about. What are we talking about here? What does it really mean?
Sorry, the question is not very clear.
What we're talking about is that we want to have a general understanding of what illicit financial flow is all about. We want Nigerians to appreciate the concept of illicit financial flow.
Well, in general, when we talk about illicit financial flows, we refer to the assets, particularly in terms of money that flows out of a country. And this term has been used often with respect to the flows of illicit funds, mostly proceeds of corruption from Africa to other parts of the world. It could be in the reverse, maybe illicit flows also come into Africa, but the narrative has mostly been on the illicit flows from Africa in recent times.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdullahi Shehu. We'll get back to you shortly. Now, let's come back to Abuja to hear from our guest in the studio here. Let's have your own perspective about illicit financial flows. What does that mean? I mean, we need to let the ordinary man understand what it is all about before we get into the nitty-gritty of the discussion.
Well, illicit financial flow refers, put simply, refers to movement of illegally acquired money or assets from one country to another. As Professor put it, it could mean movement of illicit funds from developing countries to developed countries. It could also mean, in a reverse form, movement of money from one country to finance illegal activities like terrorism in another country. So it is like a two-way traffic, movement from developing country resources, assets and illicit finances from one country to the other. And then it could also mean coming from developed country, to come and finance dirty deals and businesses, in countries of the South. So all of them are also shredded very often in secrecy. So that is key, that these movements are shrouded, in secrecy and are perpetrated by high-tech, high-level personalities, in these countries.
All right, Malam Abubakar Saleh is a tax consultant. What's your own perspective, to what illicit financial flows is all about?
Okay, good morning. Just like they put everything together, illicit financial flow basically is capital flight, based on the concept of earning, transferring, or using illegally gotten wealth from the developing countries to the developed countries. And in this context, usually here in Nigeria, not only in Nigeria, in other developing countries, we have various ways in which these things are being done. And one of it is through tax evasion. You understand? I still can remember during the voluntary asset and income declaration scheme launched last year by this administration, the vice president was quoted saying Nigeria has more than 70 million economically active individuals. But out of this number, only 14 million were in the tax system of the country. And out of these, 95% of them are paying taxes through the payee system. Only 4% were paying their taxes based on direct assessment. You can imagine the number. That's just like 20% of the number given as in the total 70 million active individuals we have. And he went ahead to say that we have about 214 Nigerians that are paying taxes that are above 20 million naira every year. And all of them in Lagos State.
All right, Malam Saleh, we'll get to these details shortly, but let's go quickly to our Sokoto studio to join Professor Sadiq Isa, rather, to hear his own definition of this particular topic we're talking about today, which is illicit financial flow. Let's hear from you, sir.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Illicit financial flows, globally recognized as a major problem, has three major components. One, outflow of funds through the activities of criminal elements. Then number two, outflow of finances as a result of corruption by government officials. Number three, outflow of resources through the nefarious activities of multinational corporations. These multinational corporations like HSBC, like MTN, and many others salt away resources in their areas of jurisdiction using a number of strategies that are dubious. Example, they employ tax avoidance, tax evasion, profit shifting, over-invoicing, under-invoicing, transfer pricing, etc., etc. Therefore, illicit financial flows, some call it illicit financial outflows, is a major problem that needs to be addressed through a number of strategies. But to put it simply, illicit financial flows is a strategy used by, especially, of course not limited to the three major groups. We're talking of corrupt government officials, we're talking of multinational corporations, giant corporations salt away a lot of resources from developing countries to their base. Then finally, taking our resources by criminal elements through money laundering, through gun running, human trafficking, and what have you. Therefore, it's a whole gamut of quite a number of illegal activities carried out by people, especially in developing countries, to the benefit of developed countries. And we have seen data to show that actually a lot of resources. Thabo Mbeki panel report that was revealed in 2015 has shown that minimally in Africa, as much as $50 billion is taken away from the continent to other parts of the world, especially developed countries. And I think this is money needed in Africa, and if Nigeria is considered the strongest economy in Africa, then by extension, Nigeria should be considered as the major victim of illicit financial flows, meaning that Nigeria has to do a lot of work to ensure that this problem is addressed and addressed squarely.
All right, Professor Rada, thank you very much indeed. We'll return to you in a short while, and that will be when we'll be looking at why is it so high on the part of developing nations? Because the report has it that it's more from the developing countries. Why should that be so? But we'll get to that. But for now, let's return to Germany, where we have Professor Abdullahi Shehu, a former DG of the ECOWAS Intergovernmental Action Group against money laundering. Now, let's share from your experience, how is this nefarious financial crime perpetuated? How is it facilitated? Perhaps we believe that from your experience you would have traces of how they really go about it. What are the collaborations, local or international?
Quite frankly, the communication from the studio is very poor, and I could barely hear what you are saying. But I could hear that you are asking how is illicit financial flow facilitated. Well, first of all, we have to talk about the origin of the illicit funds. Often we are referring to the proceeds of crime, and in the case of Africa especially, we have been referring to proceeds of corruption. It is facilitated first by the corrupt practices that occur in the systems which generate the proceeds. And apparently when the perpetrators get their proceeds, they would like to launder it or to take it to safe havens where they feel safer. So there are many intermediaries that are used for that purpose, and often the financial institutions are the immediate intermediaries that are used, especially the banks. In recent times, there have been a lot of control measures, both nationally and internationally, for banks to comply in order to regulate illicit financial flows. Aside from banks, there are other facilitators, including professionals like accountants, fund managers, real estate managers, including lawyers, even though the lawyers have challenged this perspective in recent. So there are many of these professionals who facilitate the movement of illicit financial flows. Except in few cases, we have really very few proven cases of their complicities. But in general, in Nigeria, especially when we are talking of illicit financial flows, people refer to the common saying that it takes two to tango, or that two hands will clap and people will begin to say, yes, they should also be responsible. So to a large extent, they are equally responsible, but we have to look at their responsibility in the context of their financial fiduciary responsibility and obligation under the acceptable international standards against money laundering.
Very much, Professor Abdullahi Shehu. We'll get back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's return to our guest in Abuja studio here. I'll start with you, Mr. Leo Atakpo. We're still taking a look at the modus operandi. How do they operate, those involved in this complicated crime, if you like?
Well, for such crime to happen, it takes collaboration for two or more persons or institutions to make it happen. But essentially, why does it really happen, particularly in Nigeria, in Africa? It is because of weak institutions, weak systems. So these powerful criminals take undue advantage of the weaknesses in these institutions. They capitalize on the weaknesses in law enforcement, the weaknesses in border control, you know. So then at the international level, there are jurisdictions that we call safe havens, you know, for that easily receive proceeds of this crime, and then they easily hide them, you know, they easily hide them in shell, you know, they hide them in shell institutions, in secrecy banks and all of that, in Switzerland, in Liechtenstein, in so many other countries. So within Africa, you have, for instance, people who move goods and services, illegal goods, you know, across border, and then they evade custom duties, they evade custom payments, whatever, taxes, VAT, and so on and so forth. And then there's also widespread corruption, you know, in countries that these things happen. For instance, across Africa, the issue of corruption has been largely responsible, you know, for the transboundary movement of illicit finances.
Leo, you talk about weak institutions. That's very critical to this discussion. Now, you find out that this crime is perpetrated mostly in developing economies. Is it that the leadership is not aware of the need to restructure and set up strong institutions?
Oh yes, that is the issue, and that is where civil society come in. Because over time, these institutions have been allowed to rot and decay. So there is serious problem of law enforcement, for instance. So criminals now operate with impunity. They operate with so much impunity. They have some kind of easy getaway with their criminal activities. So that in itself is a problem. And then the way to go is to strengthen these institutions so that those criminals that are involved in illicit financial flow can be deterred, from carrying out such illegal activities that has, helped to perpetrate poverty in this part of the world. Because the major impact of illicit financial flow is that millions, of citizens in countries where they are perpetrated are left in poverty, abject poverty, and undermine the rule of law, as well as even to the extent of crippling effects on the economy of various countries.
All right. Thank you indeed. Establishing strong institutions is one thing, and on the other hand, having the capacity, to track such a complex financial crime is another. We shall get to that. But let's turn to our guest here. Let me ask you this. From what Professor Shehu explained in Germany, there appears to be a multi-dimensional approach to the facilitation of this kind of crime. He mentioned people, several professionals who could make it possible. What's your own perspective to that?
Actually, what the professor says is actually true, because just like what this gentleman said, it takes two to tango. And we have these professionals. Take, for example, there is no way you expect money to leave the shore of this country to another country without a professional being involved, be it from the banking sector, and just like the ones you mentioned, even though some of them are saying no to it. But more than 70% of these cases, more especially on the anti-money laundering problem we have, the money laundering problem we have, they are facilitated by officials in the banking industry, which are professionals, honestly. And if you look at this statistic, you now know that, okay, then definitely for us to have these things, we have to strengthen the institution. For each of these institutions where we know there has to be professionalism, then there has to be check and balances for all these professionals, be it in whatever capacity or whichever level that these people are going to be involved, be it in the banking industry or any other industry that we are going to have the professionals that are involved in this illicit financial flow, or are used as couriers for this illicit financial flow, then automatically we have to believe that strengthening the institutions and applying disciplinary actions that will guide the function and functionality of these institutions and individuals that are working in this institution, then definitely that is the only way that we're going to have to stem this problem we have in these institutions, which leads to these illicit financial flows.
All right, let's go over to Sokoto and join Professor rather quickly. Now, we're dealing with those involved in this crime. It is obvious from the conversation so far that it is not just about citizens of a developing economy. Take, for instance, Nigeria, moving out capital out of the country. They have partners. They have international partners who are working with them. They have perfect synergy. That leads me to the issue of institutions. Now, we want to say that before you take on this question, we want to avoid calling names of multinationals, but just keeping a blanket statement around that. Now, I want you to tell us, what is the mode of operation? How do they collaborate with international partners? And why are we having challenges with our institutions in terms of capacity?
Thank you very much. The multinational corporations I've mentioned is in public domain. Your papers have reported them, and they are in public view. They are being discussed, so there is nothing new about it. We know what they do, so we don't feel ashamed or afraid of mentioning them. The fact is the fact, and there is no going back. But to respond to your question, and I want to add my voice regarding the issue of how illicit financial flows take place. You see, take taxation. You know, they look at every single loophole that exists in the tax laws of the country, and they get advices from lawyers. Then they deliberately circumvent them to make sure that they don't pay tax. Then they do tax avoidance. Then there is profit shifting, over invoicing of imports. Imports coming from the countries are overinflated to take our currency. Exports taken away from, let's say, from Nigeria or Africa are undervoiced. These are strategies. These are common. Literature is replete with a number of strategies used by multinational corporations to salt away resources in African countries. It's there. It has been discussed thoroughly in Nigerian universities, and is very. Patrick Wilmot wrote a whole book on how multinational corporations underdeveloped African countries. It's not anything new. The problem is it is now being discussed. In the past, African governments were so afraid or were complicit and were not willing to discuss it. But today, we say no, we have to discuss it because it is bringing the African continent down. Now, banks are complicit regarding what happens as far as illicit financial flows goes in Nigeria. And you can talk about the lawyers. The fact that professionals say they don't do it, it doesn't mean they really don't do it. What do you expect from them? To tell you that they do it? No, they will not say it. Banks are complicit. Today, arising from our last conference, evidence has shown that today in the banks, there are people with 2, 3, 4, and even 5 bank verification numbers. How do they come about it? Today, during the last conference, it was revealed by NFIU that there are still MDAs that do not comply with the TSA. How do they do it? They do it with the connivance of the banks, lawyers, accountants, auditors. So professionals, if we want to tackle this problem, everybody has to contribute, but fundamentally speaking, professionals have to play their role. Now, illicit financial flows, you can say, is a very huge means of making sure that countries in Africa remain what they are, very poor. Why? Because a lot of the resources meant for development and the actualization of the sustainable development goals are taken away. And the fact of the matter is, these resources go in one direction, nothing comes back. And if it keeps going, countries like Nigeria will suffer. We have said time and again, Nigeria's economy is the strongest. Therefore, there is going to be more foreign investment. If we don't block holes regarding foreign business and we allow all kinds of businesses to do it without respecting the laws, I mean, it is neither here nor there. The resources, the supposedly foreign direct investment that comes to Nigeria will only bring poverty to our continent. And I think we need to work very hard to ensure that illicit financial flows do not become too recurrent, and wherever it exists, it must be fought.
Right, Professor, rather interesting indeed, and I will remain with you for a short while. You have mentioned, the dimensions that the process of doing this take. Well, Joy, Professor Rada is actually a member of the Committee Against Corruption, so he has a wealth
of knowledge on
yes, an understanding of what is going on there. So that's why I want to ask you a question in connection with the issue of having strong institutions, as raised by Mr. Leo here, that we need to build strong institutions. If you have all this knowledge and knowing the process, why is it that the institutions that we have are weak? Well, because they cannot track what is going on, and this has it has lasted for decades.
Okay. Yeah, yes, Can you hear me? I concur with you strongly that we need strong institutions in the fight against corruption, because the fight against corruption should go beyond any government. How do you do that? You strengthen the institutions by enacting laws that will make sure that after the government goes, the laws are there. And that's why the National Assembly is needed. The National Assembly has as many as 4 bills in front of it intended to fight corruption in Nigeria. That is what is called POCA, Proceed of Crime Bill. That is what is called the whistleblower policy. There are at least 4 of them in front of the national for the last 2 years plus, but they have not. If they had been passed, these are ways of ensuring that the fight against corruption is institutionalized. Secondly, there are supposed to be compliance officers, let's say in banks, and all of us who belong to professions. I belong to ASU. When I go wrong, my union ASU has to call me to order. I cannot be above my union. But lawyers seems to be above the NBA. Therefore, NBA has to make sure that all its members comply to the rules and regulations of the NBA. Banks have compliance officers. Therefore, all banks must ensure that compliance officers comply with what is provided by the profession. Likewise, accountants, therefore, to institutionalize, to strengthen our institutions, we have code of ethics, we have professional codes, we must comply to them. Then the judiciary, there is simply no how you can make progress in any fight against any vices, including the fight against corruption, without the judiciary. Why? Because people have to be subjected to the due process of the law. And in this regard, courts must be made very functional. Therefore, I concur totally. But then there is a character problem. There is an attitudinal problem, because even if the institutions are strengthened, while discharging your duty, you find that you are the one who will do it based on the dictates of their conscience, based on the character content that you have. Therefore, we can have all the laws, we can have all the institutions, but if our character is dented, we are not honorable enough, we are not committed to our country, we are not patriotic about our country, I mean, things will go as usual. If you want to say business as usual should stop, then individually, let us challenge ourselves. To what extent am I willing, even in the absence of anybody, to comply with the laws operating in my jurisdiction? Because one major definition of integrity is that you should do the right thing even if nobody is looking at you. How many of us professionally will do the right thing even if nobody is looking at us? And therefore, strengthening of institutions is as good as changing our character content. The more we become dubious and we rationalize it, then the more institutions become useless, because nobody will be there to supervise what you do every single moment. There are times when your integrity, your conscience, your character has to determine what you do. Therefore, in addition to institutions, let us change our character for the better.
Thank you very much, Professor Rada in Sokoto. I agree with you. This is a fight that must be fought collectively. Now, let's go quickly to Professor Abdullahi Shehu in Germany via Skype to continue with the conversation. Now, we are analyzing the mode of operation of this terrible crime, and we've looked at the need to build strong institutions, get lawyers to do what they need to do. Now, I also want to agree that Nigeria, for instance, is being proactive, considering the series of events we've had in the last 2 weeks on fighting this battle. Let's hear from you. Can we fight this battle adequately without getting support from the international community?
Again, the system is not very audible, but I had you ask a question about building institution. And I would like to collaborate the views expressed by other panelists that building institution is one of the cardinal key building blocks for the fight against illicit financial flows, because if you build strong institutions, you will be able to prevent the funds from flowing out of your system in the first place. And therefore, the preventive approach is by far the most important approach to combating illicit financial flows. With respect to whether we are receiving cooperation from the international community or not, I guess that Professor Rada, who is in the system, is in a better position to say so. But I know that when I was Director General of JABA, we received reports from countries that they were receiving significant cooperation from their collaborators. And one of the credible institutions or frameworks we created was to strengthen the financial intelligence units in order to facilitate the sharing of information among countries. That has worked quite well, and I believe is still working very well. The other countries also have their own systems. So we have to appreciate the difficulties they may also encounter in terms of providing rapid information and also the kind of support that they should give. But it is morally acceptable, it is generally acceptable that it is morally wrong for anybody to receive proceeds of crime and keep it in his or her system. So to that extent, there is a consensus in the that we should prevent illicit financial flows in the first place, and where it has occurred, we should cooperate within the framework of the law, and especially the United Nations Convention against transnational organized crime and against corruption, which provide the necessary legal framework for cooperation among countries. But to do that, we need to strengthen our own legal and institutional frameworks by making sure that we have the appropriate legal tools in place. For example, having the mutual legal assistance legislation, and also, as the case in Nigeria, there has been this pending proceeds of crime bill, which some people said, well, is unnecessary, but the government has already sent the bill to the National Assembly, so we hope that it should be passed into law. That will strengthen the framework for asset recovery in particular. We also need to strengthen the investigative capacity of our law enforcement so that they will present such evidence in court when they are prosecuting cases. We also need to strengthen the prosecutors to be able to know what information they need in the prosecution of culpable cases, and especially with respect to confiscation and asset recovery. So to a large extent, I will conclude by saying that the recovery or the fight against illicit financial flow is a collective responsibility that both the government and the civil society must collaborate. Institutions, including those in the private sector, must also collaborate, and the international organizations are also bringing their own expertise to bear. So we hope that with this understanding, we will make some progress in the process.
All right, thank you. Let's return to Sokoto, to Professor Rada, to react to some of the issues raised by one of our guests in Germany. Prof.
I think he has raised the fundamental issues, which are that we collaborate with the international community to ensure illicit financial flows are reduced, even if not totally eliminated. And to do that, we have to do a lot of homework here, because frankly speaking, much as you want to blame destination countries for loots, first and foremost, you have to blame your people, your government officials, your politicians, and your nationals. Why? Because they are the ones that have initiated the process of illicit financial flows, and they facilitate it, because the active collaborative elite in our country make it easy and possible for all these finances to go out of our country. So a lot of homework has to be done here so that it doesn't happen at all, or it happens minimally. Then we'll look for the collaboration and cooperation of the international community. And I must admit that quite a number of countries that are destination countries for loot have said never again. We are so happy with the government of Switzerland, which is cooperating and doing a lot to ensure that what is taken to Switzerland is brought back and nothing is going to enter Switzerland anymore. Then in the entire Europe now, there are quite a number of policies and legislations to ensure that these kind of resources do not go into Europe, and where they go there is repatriated. The United States of America is doing a lot in that regard, but there are some challenges. These include, for example, differences in legislation, jurisdictional matters. The laws here will be different from the laws in other parts of the world. They have their requirements, and therefore we have a duty to study their requirements and make proposals, make applications to ensure that we comply with their laws. But there are things, rough edges here and there, that make it extremely difficult to bring back looted funds. And we are working very hard to gain the understanding of foreign governments that looted funds, once brought back to Nigeria, will not be relooted again. Because one of the fears of these destination countries is that if monies are brought back, it's going to be relooted. But to be fair to this government and to be fair to this country, we can see that funds are judiciously used. This is the first government that has, created line items in the budget to finance the budget using recoveries. Therefore, whatever comes from abroad will be flowed into the economy and will be financed, or will be used to finance the budget. Therefore, the fear of relooting should not be a condition for bringing. Now, supposing this fear does not go at all, that will not justify holding on to looted funds. So we feel the international community is doing a lot. The international community is helping Nigeria and many African countries, but more is needed. For example, evidence has shown that some of these multinational corporations that come to third world countries or developing countries and offer bribes, back home, they are prosecuted, they are fined. But part of what they get in developed countries as fine, even though the offense is committed, let's say in Nigeria, no single amount of that money comes back to Nigeria, even though the offense was committed in Nigeria. So criminal fines should be distributed among the countries where the offense happened and where, the multinational company comes from. Then again, there is the issue of disgorgement of profits. Many a times these profits are gotten, but they are not in any way shared with the countries where the offense took place. So we feel illicit financial flows has to be discussed, because we are beginning to understand more thoroughly how third world countries are being duped, how third world countries are being cheated, and the more we discuss it, the more we get an understanding of the phenomena, and the more we develop strategies to ensure that we block the loopholes back home, then what is taken outside can be pursued, and if it is pursued, we bring back the benefits of the loots back home. And it's a work in progress. Work in progress because while you are fighting corruption, once you block one avenue, then another avenue emerges, and you keep fighting. And it's a fight to finish, no going back, because without fighting corruption, there is general consensus that not only Nigeria, but the entire globe will never witness peace and stability so long as there is corruption. So I must say, the developed countries or destination countries, wherever they are, for now, are given the maximum cooperation desired to ensure that loots are brought back, and they're making sure that avenues are blocked. If you take the United Kingdom, I mean, a lot of help has come from the United Kingdom to make sure that our loots are brought back. The unexplained wealth order is one avenue used to ensure that loots are traced, recovered, and brought back. But like I told you, the rough edges will be fine-tuned, and discussion is going on. We'll buy the understanding of foreign governments so that things become smooth, and our nationals will find it very, very unattractive to steal and take it outside this country. If you want to steal and remain in Nigeria so that whistleblowers can blow a whistle against you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rada. Back in our Abuja studio, I want to go to Malam Abubakar Sali. He did a critical analysis of the situation and how the federal government is working on recovering stolen assets. And I'm glad that we are talking about it. That's the first step towards walking our talk. Now, I want you to touch on the legal aspect, because from our conversation so far, it's beginning to look like we need to strengthen our legal system if we want to win this fight. What's your take?
Thank you very much. Before I go on to that, let me add one or two things to what those professors said there. Okay. Apart from just enacting laws or enabling other laws to strengthen the institutions, we need the institutions' independence. Because take, for example, when we are fighting corruption, we are talking about institutions like the EFCC, the ICPC, but we always forget about code of conduct, which usually is supposed to come first. In this case, we are supposed to have like predictive, preventive, then corrective. Usually the cases we have in Nigeria are of the corrective inclined. You can see that it is only when the crime are committed that we are now trying to see how we can get to that. But I am trying to bring out this issue. Take, for example, even after almost a year, after swearing in some of the government officials, I was able to check on the Code of Conduct website, and I saw a list of officials there where didn't declare their assets. So yes, a year after. So if we can have a situation whereby someone has been sworn in without even declaring asset, then automatically we are now creating another loophole where they can take advantage of. So coming back to your issue, because when we talk of legal system, we are still talking about not only going to the court or otherwise, but still the law itself is the legal system. Because if you have an enabling law that guides this institution and how they are supposed to operate and what they are supposed to do, there wouldn't be the need to go to the other aspect of it. Because take, for example, if there's a law that says anybody either appointed by a government is not going to be sworn in until he has declared his asset, then automatically you will see a lot of people declaring their asset before even sworn in into their offices. So if we can have these issues, to have this institution independence and strengthened in such a way that it takes care of the issue from the predictive, then preventive, before the corrective aspect, then this thing is going to go a long way in stopping the issues. Based on what the Professor Rada is saying, that if we can stop it from Nigeria, we don't have to go there trying to see how we can stop it from other countries abroad. So if we can have all this legal framework, the institutions coming together to sit down and discuss and see, okay, where are the loopholes? What and what and what are we not getting right? So that if we can see how we can strengthen both the institutions, the legal framework that are attached to these institutions, the independence of these institutions, so that we can have a strengthened institution that will stop these illegal activities and illicit financial flows, then we have less to do when it comes to issue of discussing with the developed countries, where, because as far as we're going to take money there and it is not going to be traced, they will collect automatically. So therefore the issue is, how are we going to stop it from here? The question is, yes, because we don't have to go to the destination, we have to look at the source. So the fighting should be from the source. And with technology now, at least we are going somewhere, because there are a lot of things that are being done, anti-money laundering software that are used by the financial institutions, which report to these crime-fighting institutions, the EFCC, the ICPC, and the rest. So I guess if we can strengthen this institution and give them more independence, we are going to see a lot of improvement in that direction.
All right, thank you very much indeed. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTN. We have been discussing illicit financial flows. Of course, this is a trend that's lasted for decades in this country. And of course, we've been hearing from Professor Sadiq Isarada, a member Presidential Advisory Committee. He's there in Sokoto. Of course, we've also been hearing from Professor Abdullahi Shehu, reaching us via Skype in Germany. And of course, Leo Atabu is also here, and Malam Abubakar Saleh. Now, let's take a short break. When we return, we'll be telling you what other Nigerians are thinking about this important topic by way of tweets. All right, thanks for staying tuned. We are back, and it's time for us to look at the tweet. Joy, like
okay, let's start with this one coming from Mike Anyaku. He tweets, illicit financial flows is an aberration to the economy. More worrisome is that the perpetrators of these economic crimes are being abated by our commercial banks. This amounts to capital flights, which is dangerous to our economy. Today, many banks operate what they call private. CBN and NDIC should punish accordingly any bank found guilty of aiding illicit flows, and perpetrators should face adequate sanctions. We must enforce laws in this country.
All right, from Delejak Solomon, there is need for the federal government to dialogue with destination countries to remove conditionalities with regards to recovered illicit funds and assets and the prosecution of financial institutions that violate anti-corruption laws, as well as imposition of sanctions against financial institutions.
DW Nigeria tweets, it is simple. Seize the assets or funds, jail them, and ban them from holding political office for life. That's it.
All right, Festus Akimboewa, sad. The huge amount of money is drained out of Nigeria every year to the detriment of our development. Government must ensure our money laundering laws are vigorously enforced, prosecute the people using shell companies to cheat Nigeria, and ensure multinational companies are transparent.
The next one is from Victor Ohio Sumwa. Illicit financial flows has always been with us. It's a major arm of corruption. To tackle these nefarious activities, the various agencies, including professional bodies, should ensure proper implementation of our laws. There is need for the National Assembly to pass the Process of Crime Bill.
All right, from Sani Michael Omakoji, this crime happens in Africa because of weakness in our system. To worsen the situation, there are even an unofficial collaboration between some officials of our agents and the foreigners who carry out this illicit act. We need to overhaul our system sincerely. And Joy, if you have been following the trends of what's been happening in the past week, there has been this altercation between Nigerian government and one of the biggest banks in Europe on the issue of dealing with Nigerian leaders, over 50 of them, and ensuring that their loot is accommodated in their banks. I mean, it's been, upgoing, the HTC responding and all of that. Okay. But that brings us to the issue of what is the role of banks, both Nigeria and outside Nigeria, in this business, because this cannot happen without collaboration and without passing through banks.
That's right.
Right. So I want to bring in Mr. Atabu here.
Oh, well, I think a lot is happening through the banks on perpetration of illicit financial flows. In fact, that is where the action is. There's difficulty in moving money without involvement of the banking system. So that being the case, I think the National Financial Intelligence Unit, which has just been established through an act of parliament, has a whole lot of duty role to play here, to ensure that information is properly disseminated to the appropriate agencies to trace and track such flows before they even leave outside the shore. And there's a recent report of the central bank, which it released, that some commercial banks are not complying with certain regulations and laid down rules. We also have been concerned that what has happened to those banks, that have been violating the laid down rules and procedures, in checking some of these issues. So there must be some kind of sanctions, for the banking system, to now help to strengthen and deter banks from continuing this action. But again, to take it back to the issue of the international community support, in the fight against illicit financial flows, a number of initiatives have happened. The London 2016 anti-money laundering summit, where the president, Muhammadu Buhari, attended, underscored the need for international collaboration to attack these illicit financial flows from developing countries to the developed world. At that summit,
how is that playing out?
Yes.
Is it working?
Yes. At that summit, the president committed to the open government partnership. So the open government partnership is to raise the issue of financial transparency, because financial transparency is key to dealing with the issue of illegal financial flow. So at that forum also, some countries came together to establish this global forum for for asset recovery, GIFA. So the GIFA, they made a number of commitments, where they also met again in Washington in December. It was at that summit that held from 4th to 6th of December that the Nigerian government signed an MOU with the Switzerland government to repatriate the Abuja loot to Nigeria. And civil society were part of that signing of the MOU, which was novel, all right? So the international community, the United Kingdom, the US government, they work together with Switzerland to ensure the repatriation of some of the monies that have been identified already in some countries back to Nigeria. And some of those money are now currently being used, to finance the National Social Investment Program, to deal with the issue of poverty in the country. Now the GIFA commitment has now also made it possible for a number of countries to now begin to also commit to dealing with the issue of illicit financial flow. The United Kingdom, for instance, under its second project, is even committing £20 million to deal with this issue. They've even supported the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission with close to £500,000 to strengthen its investigative systems, And they're also supporting a number of civil society organizations to even now begin to monitor the utilization of illicit flows that have been recovered. The Abuja 2 loot, for instance. They are supporting civil society organizations to now begin to monitor the utilization. Because again, as Sadiq put it, to prevent the relooting of the returned loot. So all of these are happening, rapidly from the international community, supporting local ideas, local initiatives, local technologies, developing them, joining forces to build new product, to begin now to prevent, the outflow of the nation's resources.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo Atapo. Obviously, what the current administration is doing in terms of stopping this illegal crime is really working. Let's go quickly to Professor Abdullahi Shehu in Germany. We've been talking about those who collaborate to facilitate this illicit financial flows. And if you listen to what we read from our online viewers, they laid so much emphasis on the fact that banks are aiding the flow out of this country, and there's a need to sanction them. Let's hear from you. What role can the banking industry play in prevention of this crime, and how can we use ICT to fight this battle? Oh, all right, let's return back here. We'll get back to him as soon as we sort out the audio issue. So let's go quickly to Sokoto and rejoin Professor Rada. Professor Rada, we're looking at those involved in this act and the need to sanction them. I'm sure you listened to our online viewers where they were talking about how banks have been, they've played a major role in movement of capital out of this country. What can we do to get the banks to work? You talked about collaborative effort in waging this war. And how can we take advantage of what ICT has to offer to fight this battle?
Actually, that's an excellent area we have to work very hard. This is because we have a lot of regulatory bodies in Nigeria. CBN, for example, NDIC, NCC, many of these regulatory bodies have been doing a lot, but they need to do more. Therefore, to begin with, we must ensure that all our regulatory bodies rise to the occasion. Of course, in the past, the issue of illicit financial flows was not placed on the agenda of the African continent, let alone Nigeria. Therefore, today, illicit financial flows is an agenda regarding looting of resources in the continent. Therefore, in the past, regulatory bodies maybe were looking at corruption, bribery, selling our resources by nationals without taking into consideration the multidimensional aspect of the international aspect of the illicit financial flows. Now, we must take it as an international matter and we must put it continuously on the agenda. Therefore, regulatory bodies must do their work. Secondly, I keep saying that each profession has its professional code of practice. Medicine, engineering, accounting, auditors, bankers, everybody, lecturers, we all have ethics of our profession. Then we have professional requirement for our conducts. We must comply with them. Therefore, in addition to being regulated from outside, we should regulate ourselves inside and ensure that what we have assigned to ourselves to do, let's do it faithfully and with all sense of responsibility. And in this regard, I think one area we have neglected is the issue of asset recovery, but asset management. And I think Nigeria is not doing very well regarding asset management. We are being able to confiscate a lot because the discussion keeps revolving around the issue of money. But when you are talking of looting of resources in third world countries and tracing them, confiscating them, it goes beyond money alone. We are talking of properties, we are talking of shares, we are talking of jewelries, we are talking of jewels, we are talking of luxury items, we are talking of ships, we are talking of perishable items. Therefore, we must develop strategies to ensure that these things, once recovered, are maintained. In the past, a lot is recovered and allowed to waste. Today, a lot is recovered, but some of it is being managed. But again, a lot is being wasted. We need to work very hard on that because in the issue, regarding the issue of asset recovery, 3 things are required minimum. One, if you recover, let's say, property, you must be able to add value to it or retain value, minimum. Then secondly, in the attempt to solve a problem, you don't create another problem. There are instances, for example, where you confiscate a hotel with workers. You don't close the hotel and sack the workers. Rather, you go into an arrangement with professionals on how to keep on running the hotel, maintain the workers so that they are not sacked, creating another problem. Therefore, as a committee, we have done a lot regarding asset management and we are going to do more in collaboration with the anti-corruption agencies and all other agencies that have one business or the other regarding asset confiscation so that what we confiscate is not wasted. What we confiscate has value and the value is retained to ensure that the thing is not to do with vindictiveness, meanness, or vengeance. Rather, the society should get value. If it is a product of crime, the product of crime must go back to society. The only way it can go back to society is to ensure that the value is added or the value is maintained and we don't create more problems in the attempt to solve one problem.
Indeed. At this point, we'd like to return to Germany. Professor Shehu, I hope you can hear us clearly now. The question put to you by my colleague Joy a short while ago centered on the issue of the partners who perpetuate this illicit act. Now, how can ICT be deployed to counter the process of this illicit capital flight?
Thank you very much. I would like to make the final remarks now so I can attend to other things. I had a few questions. I'll try to address them as I had them. The first one is the use of technology. It's very, very important that we appreciate the use of technology in tracking assets, but this is more useful to the banks and financial intelligence units. Each financial intelligence unit uses a particular software for the analysis of suspicious transactions reports. So to that extent, technology is very, very important. The second question I had was, how can we make the banks to comply? The Financial Action Task Force 40 recommendations make it very clear that the banks have responsibilities to report suspicious and currency transactions to the FIU for the suspicious transactions and the currency transactions to the central bank. And I think to a large extent in Nigeria, they are doing so. The issue of sanction, I agree that sanction is important, Of recent, the central bank issued what it called administrative sanction, which contains about 48 different sanctions to be imposed on a financial institution should it fail to comply with anti-money laundering regulations. So I think this is a step forward. We only need to improve on that. The other issue I had was what to do with the recovered assets. We can never have a consensus on that. People will have different views. But the government of the day has the prerogative to decide on what it should use the recovered assets for. Currently, the government is using it for social investment program. Many Nigerians do not agree to that, but I believe that the government must have done some studies to prove that that is the most effective way it can use the recovered assets. On my own, I would have thought that we should first of all determine the origin of any recovered asset. For example, if we are recovering $321 million from Switzerland, we should be able to know where did it originate from? What was it meant for? Was it meant for a road project before it was diverted, or it was meant for an airport project? If it was meant for whatever project, we should go back to that project and invest it and put a signage that, yes, this road was constructed with proceeds of money that was recovered on so-so-so date from so-so-so country for people to see. That is easier to monitor and it is easier to measure. But as I said, the government has the prerogative to determine how it can use the recovered funds for. My final comment here has to do with actually trying to look inward and develop a homegrown solution to the problem of illicit financial flows. We need to put in mechanisms that will prevent the pilfering of our resources, let alone the laundering of such assets abroad. If we do that, I think we are going to prevent a lot of our assets being stolen and laundered in other jurisdictions. I thank you very much. This is the last comment I have to make, and I have to take your leave.
Very much, Professor Abdullahi Shehu, former Director General of the ECOWAS Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa, GABA. That was quite insightful. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Now, quickly, let me take one question to Malam Abubakar Saleh, and it's about accountability. Professor Shehu did talk about accountability towards the end of our last conversation with him. So that leads me to the question of people who hold political offices. A school of thought will tell you that most of those involved in this act are those who are within the upper class. How can we hold them accountable?
Thank you very much once again. Actually, that is where the problem lies, because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. When we have people in authority that are the ones that are controlling virtually everything in the economy or other things, it comes back to my point before of the independence of this institution, whereby certain institution needs particular independence for them to either prosecute or have any effect on these individuals. But where you have an individual who commits a crime, financial crime or whatever type of crime, is being celebrated by his own people, you understand, for even doing what he did or even being protected. You can see a criminal, somebody that commits a crime, though alleged, but with an army of lawyers, you understand, trying to protect what he did. So it always comes back to the institution itself. When you take a simple issue of the project management methodology from initiation, planning, execution, management to closing, you will see that planning is the key to everything. So we have to keep planning on how to tackle all these issues while executing. If there's any problem we still come back to planning again and continue until when we have the best and the final solution to what we feel can tame all these issues.
All right, Madam Abubakar Saleh, thank you indeed. And one school of thought, did define this kind of capital flight as the outflow of resident capital that is motivated by political or economic uncertainty in any nation. And Nigeria is not in that kind of precarious situation, so one wonders why this capital flight is going on. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insightful contribution to our conversation this morning. First of all, let's, of course, appreciate the Deputy Executive Director of African Network for Sustainable Development and Justice, Mr. Leo Atabu. Thank you very much indeed for honoring our invitation.
Thank you.
Malam Abubakar Saleh, Systems and Business Development Analyst and Tax Consultant. It's been interesting having you this morning, sir, on the program. And from Sokoto, Professor Sadiq Issa, rather a member, Presidential Advisory Committee on against corruption. Thank you very much indeed. Your contribution